"You're just a fun night, not a future," he said. 2 years later, she returned with two futures, the twins. "Hi, my beautiful and loyal family. Welcome back to your place of comfort, Mr. Peter's family. May the Almighty surround every woman with a love that never fades, a courage that never bends, and a peace that rises above every harsh word ever spoken to her. May your nights be softened by mercy, your days strengthened by grace, and your future filled with blessings that wipe away every old sorrow. You are the quiet miracle the world overlooks, the heart that holds families together, the hands that heal without being asked, the soul that keeps giving even when tired. May joy return to you gently, may hope find you easily, and may every path ahead open with light meant only for you. My precious family, your presence is the warmth of this home. A like is a drop of love, a comment is a spark of unity. If your heart believes in healing, like this video. If your spirit walks in goodness, comment, "I'm with Mr. Peter." Some mistakes taste like champagne and feel like destiny, until morning proves you wrong. Robin Parrish stepped into the boardroom of Smith Industries wearing confidence like armor and Louboutins like weapons. The mahogany table stretched before her, surrounded by men who didn't yet understand their world, had already shifted on its axis. At the head of that table sat Justin Smith, golden-haired and sharp-jawed, reviewing documents with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never truly lost anything. He didn't recognize her. That single fact sent a dark thrill through Robin's chest. Not quite satisfaction, not quite pain, something more complex, aged in silence and sharpened by sleepless nights. "Gentlemen," the interim CFO announced nervously, "I'd like to introduce Robin Parrish, CEO of Parrish Global, and your new majority shareholder." Justin's head snapped up. Blue eyes. God, she remembered those eyes, scanned her face with the vague confusion of someone trying to place a half-forgotten dream. His brow furrowed, his lips parted slightly. No recognition, not yet. "Ms. Parrish," he said smoothly, standing to extend his hand. "This is unexpected. We weren't aware Smith Industries was even on the market." Robin let him stand there, hand outstretched, for 3 seconds longer than comfortable. When she finally accepted the handshake, she made sure her grip was firm, professional, absolutely devoid of warmth. "It wasn't on the market, Mr. Smith. I simply acquired all your outstanding debts through various channels. The mathematics were quite simple after that." The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, sheets of water distorting the Seattle skyline into watercolor impressions. Just like that night. Just like the night everything began and ended in the space of 12 hours. 8 years ago, the charity gala had been Robin's first major event after moving to Seattle. She'd worn a dress that cost 3 months of her assistant's salary, emerald green because her aunt always said it made her skin glow like honey in sunset. The foundation was raising money for youth education programs, and Robin had been there representing the non-profit where she worked, feeling like an imposter among tech moguls and old money dynasties. Then the storm hit, not the gentle Seattle drizzle, but a biblical downpour that sent guests scrambling. Robin had stood under the museum's awning, watching sheets of rain turn the streets into rivers, her phone dead and her rideshare app useless. "Need a ride?" She'd turned to find Justin Smith, though she hadn't known his name yet, holding his jacket over his head, grinning like the rain was a grand adventure instead of an inconvenience. His white dress shirt was already soaked, clinging to shoulders that suggested he did more than sit behind a desk. "I don't accept rides from strangers," she'd said. "Then let's stop being strangers. I'm Justin." Robin. They'd ended up in his penthouse apartment, their expensive clothes dripping puddles onto marble floors. He'd made hot chocolate, the good kind with real cream and a hint of cinnamon. They'd talked for hours, sprawled on his leather couch about everything and nothing, about her dreams of starting her own tech company someday, about his complicated relationship with his father's empire, about whether the rain in Seattle was actually cleansing or just persistent. When he'd kissed her, it felt inevitable. When she'd kissed him back, It felt like falling and flying simultaneously. They'd made love while the storm raged outside, and Robine had let herself believe in fairy tales for one perfect night. Morning came with cruel clarity. She'd woken to find him dressed in a fresh suit, already pulling away emotionally even though physically they were inches apart. "Last night was incredible," he'd said, and she'd heard the but coming before he spoke it. "But I need to be honest with you, I'm not looking for anything serious. My family has expectations, and there's someone they want me to consider for, look, you're amazing, but you're just a fun night, not a future." The words had hit like physical blows. She dressed in silence, her beautiful emerald dress now wrinkled and shameful. He'd offered to call her a car, his politeness somehow worse than cruelty would have been. She'd walked out into the morning rain without another word. "Ms. Parrish?" Justin's voice pulled her back to the present. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch that." Robine smiled, and it was all teeth, no warmth. "I said, I'll be making several structural changes immediately. This company has been hemorrhaging money due to poor leadership decisions. I intend to correct that." His father, Richard Smith, cleared his throat from his seat. "With all due respect, Ms. Parrish, this company has been in our family for generations. We've weathered difficult periods before. And yet you've never weathered me." Robine opened her portfolio, sliding a document across the table. "These are my terms, non-negotiable. I suggest you review them carefully." She watched Justin scan the pages, watched the color drain from his face as he understood the magnitude of what she'd done. Every debt, every loan, every vulnerable asset, she'd purchased them all with the patience of someone who'd spent years planning this exact moment. "This is corporate warfare," Justin said quietly. "No, Mr. Smith, this is business. I believe you understand the distinction. You certainly did when you built your fortune on the backs of smaller companies you absorbed." The meeting lasted another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. Robine held every card, controlled every move. By the time she stood to leave, Smith Industries existed only at her pleasure. As she walked toward the door, Justin called out, "Have we met before? There's something familiar." Robine paused, turned, let him see her face fully in the light streaming through those rain-washed windows. She watched his eyes widen, watched recognition begin to dawn like a slow, horrible sunrise. "Everyone has one of those faces, Mr. Smith. I'm sure I just remind you of someone insignificant." She left him standing there, surrounded by the ruins of his empire, finally beginning to remember the woman he'd discarded like yesterday's newspaper. Outside, her driver held an umbrella over her head, shielding her from the rain. Robin slid into the back seat of her car, pulled out her phone, and looked at the photo she kept locked in a private folder. Two beautiful boys with Justin's blue eyes and her determined chin, laughing at something off camera. Prince and Harrison. Her futures. The futures he'd never know he'd walked away from. Not yet. But soon Justin Smith would understand exactly what he'd lost that rainy morning when he'd chosen pride and prejudice over possibility. Soon he would beg, and she would make sure he understood that some mistakes don't get forgiven, they get reckoned with. The rain continued to fall as her car pulled away from Smith Industries, and Robine allowed herself the smallest, coldest smile. The reckoning had only just begun. Chapter 2. Empire Built on Tears. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but empire building requires fire. Robin's office overlooked Elliott Bay from the 42nd floor, a view she'd specifically chosen because it cost twice what Justin's corner office had commanded. The morning sun reflected off the water, turning the sound into liquid gold, but she wasn't admiring the scenery. She was reviewing the financial projections that would complete Smith Industries' dismantling, her red pen marking surgical cuts that would preserve jobs while destroying the family's legacy. Her assistant, Gabriel, entered with coffee and concern. "The Journal is requesting an interview about the acquisition. They're calling you the most ruthless CEO in the Pacific Northwest." "Tell them I'll consider it once I've earned the title." Robine didn't look up from her work. Also push my afternoon meetings. The boys have their recital tonight and I promised I'd be early. Already done. And Robine? Gabriel hesitated. The background check you requested on Justin Smith came back. Should I send it through? Leave it on my desk. Alone again, Robine allowed herself to sink back into her chair, exhaustion creeping in around the edges of her armor. Building an empire while raising twins alone hadn't left much room for weakness, but in private moments like these, the weight of it all pressed down like atmospheric pressure. She pulled up another locked folder on her computer, this one containing photos she could never bring herself to delete, the pregnancy test with its 2 pink lines, the ultrasound showing 2 tiny heartbeats, the hospital bracelet from the day she'd given birth, alone, except for the aunt who'd been her only family. The days after Justin's rejection had been a blur of humiliation and hurt. Robine had thrown herself into her work at the non-profit, trying to forget the feel of his hands, the sound of his laugh, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered before deciding she didn't. Then came the nausea, the exhaustion, the doctor's appointment that changed everything. Twins. She'd tried calling Justin, left messages, sent emails. Each one went unanswered. Finally, she'd shown up at Smith Industries, only to be turned away by security. Mr. Smith wasn't available. Mr. Smith didn't accept walk-ins. Mr. Smith had left instructions about a certain woman who wasn't to be allowed access. He'd blocked her from his life so completely, he'd blocked his own children. That night, sobbing in her aunt's arms, Robine had made 2 promises. First, these babies would never feel unwanted. Second, she would build something so substantial, so undeniable, that Justin Smith would one day be forced to see exactly what he'd rejected. Her aunt, brilliant, eccentric Aunt Josephine, had smiled through her own tears. "Baby girl, there's something I need to tell you, something about your inheritance." The fortune had been a shock. Josephine had been a software engineer in the early days of tech, had invested in companies that became giants, had lived modestly while her portfolio grew exponentially. The money came with one condition. Robine had to use it to build something meaningful, something that would outlast them both. Parish Global had been born in the spare bedroom of Josephine's house, with Robine's pregnant belly pressed against a desk, coding until contractions forced her to stop. She'd launched her first product 3 months after the twins were born, surviving on determination and coffee, and the desperate need to prove she was more than Justin's discarded mistake. Now, Parish Global employed thousands. Her platforms powered everything from medical research to educational access in underserved communities. She'd built exactly what she'd promised, something undeniable. The intercom buzzed. "Robin, there's a delivery for you. No return address." Gabrielle brought in a box, expensive wrapping, no card. Inside, Robine found a first edition of Their Eyes Were Watching God, her favorite novel. The one she'd mentioned to Justin that rainy night when they'd talked about books and dreams and futures that would never exist. He was trying to remember, trying to piece together where he'd seen her before. Let him remember, she thought, replacing the book in its box. Let him remember every word he said, every promise his body made while his mouth prepared rejection. Let him remember so he could understand the full weight of what came next. Her phone rang, the twins' school. Her heart jumped the way it always did with unexpected calls. "Ms. Parrish, nothing's wrong," the administrator assured her quickly. "But both Prince and Harrison asked to speak with you. They said it's important." Minutes later, both boys were on the line, their voices overlapping with excitement. "Mama, we have a question," Prince began, always the diplomatic one. Harrison jumped in. "About our father. We know you don't like to talk about him, but we're old enough now." Robine's chest tightened. She'd known this conversation was coming, had dreaded it for years. "What do you want to know, babies?" "Why doesn't he want us?" Prince asked, and the hurt in his voice nearly broke her. "Did we do something wrong?" Harrison added. "Is that why he left?" "No!" The word came out fierce, protective. "You did nothing wrong. You are perfect and brilliant and loved. Your father, he didn't know about you. When I tried to tell him, he'd already made his choice about what he wanted his life to look like, and it didn't include room for possibilities." "But you tried to tell him?" Harrison pressed. He was always the one who needed facts, evidence, proof. "I tried, baby. I promise I tried." Silence on the line, then Prince spoke softly. "Are we going to meet him? Would you want to?" "Not for him," Prince said carefully. "For us. We want to see what we came from. We want to show him what he missed." Harrison's voice was harder, colder, already learning to protect himself. "We want closure, Mama. That's what my counselor calls it. We want to look him in the face and know we're better off without him." Pride and heartbreak warred in Robine's chest. Her boys, already so strong, already understanding that some absences spoke louder than presence. "Then when the time is right, you'll meet him. I promise." After the call ended, Robine sat in her office as afternoon became evening, the city lights beginning to sparkle below. The background check on Justin sat unopened on her desk, but she didn't need to read it. She'd been tracking his life for years, watching from a distance as he built his reputation and prepared to build a future with someone deemed suitable by the Smith family standards. That future was about to collapse. She would make sure of it. Not for revenge, though that word tasted sweet on her tongue. For her sons, so they could see their father stripped of the arrogance that had made him throw away something precious. So when they finally met him, they would meet a man humbled enough to recognize what he'd lost. Robine gathered her things, preparing to leave for the recital where her boys would shine like the stars they were. But before she left, she made one call. "Buy out the rest of Smith Industries' assets," she told her head of acquisitions. "All of them. By Friday, I want Justin Smith to own nothing but his name. And if he tries to stop us?" Robine looked out at the rain beginning to fall over Seattle, coating the city in that familiar grey shimmer. "Let him try. Let him do whatever desperate, prideful thing he thinks will save him. In the end, he'll learn that some debts can't be paid with money." She hung up and headed to watch her sons play piano, a duet they'd composed themselves about storms and sunshine and finding home. They played it flawlessly, in perfect synchronization, the way twins sometimes could. Afterward, as she hugged them both, Prince whispered, "Mama, you look different today. Stronger somehow." "I am stronger, baby. We all are. And we're about to get stronger still." Chapter 3. The Man Who Forgot. How to beg power teaches you many things, but humility isn't one of them, until you lose everything. Justin Smith stood in his father's study, a room that smelled like leather and disappointment, listening to Richard Smith detail the catastrophe unfolding around them. "She's bought everything," his father said, voice shaking with rage and something unfamiliar, fear. "Every loan, every contract, every piece of leverage we had. Parish Global now controls 70% of our voting shares. We're a subsidiary, Justin, a footnote in her empire." "How did we not see this coming?" Justin ran his hands through his hair, pacing. "We have people who are supposed to monitor these things." She used shell companies, intermediaries, offshore accounts. By the time we connected the dots, she'd already woven the web. This was surgical, son. This was personal. Personal. The word echoed in Justin's head as he tried to remember where he'd seen Robine Parish before. Those eyes, dark and infinite, holding secrets he couldn't quite grasp. That voice, smooth as whiskey, carrying an edge that suggested violence beneath silk. His mother, Catherine, entered with her usual impeccable timing and equally impeccable disappointment. "Ashley called. She wanted me to tell you the engagement is postponed. Apparently her father doesn't think it's wise to merge families during a financial crisis." "Postponed or cancelled?" Justin asked, though he already knew. "Does it matter? The girl has sense, at least. Unlike you, who apparently sleepwalked through every warning sign until our family legacy crumbled." "That's not fair, Catherine," Richard said, though his heart wasn't in the defense. "Fair? Our son had one job, maintain what generations built. Instead, We're at the mercy of some upstart who probably learned business from YouTube videos. Justin wanted to argue, but the words stuck in his throat. Because his mother was right about one thing. He had been sleepwalking. Through the engagement Ashley's father had suggested. Through the business decisions his father had pushed. Through the life he'd been living like it was a part he was playing rather than a reality he'd chosen. When had he stopped choosing? That night, alone in his penthouse, the same penthouse, though he tried not to think about that, Justin did something he'd never done before. He Googled himself alongside Robin Parrish's name. Nothing came up connecting them, but when he searched for Robin alone, the results were staggering. Forbes profiles, technology awards, philanthropic achievements, a self-made billionaire who'd built Parrish Global from nothing, who'd revolutionized data accessibility for marginalized communities, who'd done more for education and equity than most governments. She was magnificent, and she wanted to destroy him. Justin poured himself a scotch, then another, sitting in the dark while rain, always rain in Seattle, drummed against the windows. His phone buzzed with messages he didn't want to read. Ashley's friends removing him from group chats, business contacts suddenly unavailable, the polite destruction of a social life built on money and expectations. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. Against his better judgment he answered. "Mr. Smith." Robin's voice controlled and cold. "I thought I should inform you personally. Tomorrow's board meeting will be your last. I'm removing you from all operational roles, though you'll retain a symbolic title if you prefer. For appearance's sake." "Why are you doing this?" The question escaped before he could stop it. "Why? You're asking why I'm doing what you've done to dozens of companies? What your family built their fortune doing? That was business. This feels personal." A pause, loaded with something dangerous. "Everything is personal, Mr. Smith. You just never bothered to see the people behind your decisions. Consider this an education." "Have we met?" He heard the desperation in his own voice. "Before the acquisition, have we met?" Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Everyone has one of those faces. Good night, Mr. Smith. Sleep well if you can." She hung up. Justin stood at his window, looking out at the city lights blurred by rain, and suddenly, like a photograph developing in chemicals, he remembered. The gala, the storm, the woman in the green dress who'd laughed at his terrible jokes and debated philosophy and kissed him like she meant it, who'd felt like coming home to a place he'd never been, Robin. The woman he'd dismissed as a fun night, the woman he'd blocked from his phone because she'd called too many times and he'd been too much of a coward to face what he'd done, the woman he'd instructed security to turn away because his father had already been discussing an arrangement with Ashley's family. Oh God, he whispered to the empty room. He'd destroyed her, thrown her away because she didn't fit the image his family required, because she'd made him feel things that terrified him, because being with her would have required actual courage instead of the cheap imitation he'd been living with. And now she was destroying him. The justice of it was almost beautiful. Justin spent the rest of the night searching for every mention of Robin Parrish, trying to piece together what had happened to her after he'd shattered whatever they'd begun. The timeline was there in business filings and articles. She'd launched her first startup months after their night together, built it into something extraordinary while he'd been coasting on his father's legacy. She'd become everything she'd dreamed about that night, everything he'd claimed to admire before deciding she wasn't worth the inconvenience. Dawn found him still awake, still searching, until he found a single photograph from a charity event. Robin standing with two young boys, identical twins with light brown skin and startling blue eyes. The caption mentioned them briefly. Ms. Parrish with her sons Prince and Harrison. The photo was taken from a distance, the boys' faces partially turned away, but Justin stared at those blue eyes, the exact shade of his own, until his vision blurred. No, it couldn't be. But even as he tried to deny it, he knew. Somewhere deep in his gut, past the scotch and the fear and the pride, he knew. The timeline fit. The desperate phone calls he'd ignored fit. The security incident where a woman had tried to see him, a woman he'd had removed from the building without ever asking what she wanted. Justin made it to the bathroom just in time to be sick. his body rejecting the truth before his mind could. When the retching stopped, he sat on the cold tile floor and understood with perfect, horrible clarity. He had children, sons, beautiful boys who existed in the world without ever knowing their father because he'd been too goddamn proud and stupid and scared to answer a phone call. Robine hadn't just built an empire out of nothing, she'd raised their children alone. While he was playing at being a businessman and considering marriages of convenience, she was being everything: mother, father, provider, protector. And he'd had the audacity to ask her why this felt personal. Justin pulled himself up, looked at his reflection in the mirror. Bloodshot eyes, expensive stubble, the face of a man who'd never earned a single thing he had. "You're going to lose everything," he told that reflection, "and you're going to deserve every second of it." The board meeting that day was brief and brutal. Robine sat at the head of the table like a queen presiding over the execution of a failed kingdom. She was precise, professional, devastating in her efficiency. Every question had an answer. Every protest was met with documented evidence of incompetence. Justin's father tried to argue. His mother made veiled threats about reputation. Neither mattered. Within an hour, the Smith family retained exactly 5% of their company's shares and zero operational control. "One last thing," Robine said as people began gathering their belongings. "Justin, please stay. I'd like a word privately." The room cleared. The door closed. They sat across from each other in a silence that felt like drowning. Justin forced himself to meet her eyes. "I remember." "Do you? The rain, the green dress, everything I said the next morning, everything I did after." He swallowed hard. "The phone calls I ignored. The visit I had security turn away." "Good. Then we can skip the part where you pretend to be confused about why I'm here." "The boys," he said, and watched her entire body go rigid. "Prince and Harrison. They're mine." Robine's mask cracked, just for a second, revealing something raw and wounded before she rebuilt it. "They are mine. You're nothing to them except biology." "I didn't know." "Because you wouldn't let yourself know." She stood, gathering her papers. "You made sure you wouldn't know. That's not ignorance, Justin. That's choice." "Please." The word felt foreign in his mouth. "Please, let me—" "Let you what? Explain? Apologize? Make this about your guilt instead of their absence?" She leaned across the table and he could smell her perfume, something with jasmine and steel. "You wanted nothing to do with me. Fine. But my sons deserve better than a father who has to lose everything before he remembers they exist." She walked toward the door, and Justin felt something inside him crack completely. "What do I have to do?" he called after her. "What do I have to do to make this right?" Robine paused at the door, looked back over her shoulder. "Suffer, Justin. Suffer until you understand what suffering means. Then maybe, we'll talk about what you've lost." She left him there, alone in the ruins of his family's empire, finally understanding that some lessons can only be taught through devastation. And the devastating truth was, she was right. He deserved every second of this. Chapter 4. Ghosts Wear Gucci. Now the past doesn't knock. It buys the building and changes all the locks. The apartment Justin moved into after selling the penthouse was clean, functional, and utterly devoid of the luxury he'd taken for granted his entire life. 1,600 square feet in Capitol Hill, neighbors he could hear through walls, plumbing that groaned like an old man's knees. His mother had wept when she saw it, actual tears at the thought of her son living among normal people. He'd found the comparison helpful, actually. Normal people knew how to survive without trust funds and family names. Justin was learning. The job offers he'd expected never materialized. Apparently, being publicly dismantled by Robine Parrish made him radioactive in business circles. No one wanted to hire the man she'd outmaneuvered so completely. Some saw him as incompetent. Others feared associating with him might draw her attention to their own vulnerabilities. Both were probably right. He took work where he could find it, consulting gigs that barely covered rent, freelance projects that paid worse than entry-level positions. Pride was expensive. Humility came cheaper, but cost more in different ways. Ashley's departure had been swift and surgical. One day, her belongings were in his penthouse. The next, they were gone, along with a note that read, "I hope you understand. Daddy says it's just not practical anymore." She'd left the engagement ring on the kitchen counter next to the note, diamonds catching light like small, expensive tears. He sold the ring, put the money toward his mother's medical bills. She'd developed a stress-related condition that their reduced insurance wouldn't fully cover. The irony wasn't lost on him. The symbol of a future built on practicality, funding the health consequences of that future's collapse. But it was the loneliness that surprised him most, not the absence of Ashley. If he was honest with himself, he'd never loved her, only the idea of the life she represented. No, it was the absence of everything else. The friends who'd filled his calendar, the colleagues who'd sought his approval, the entire ecosystem of people who'd surrounded him like planets orbiting a sun that had suddenly burned out. Without money, without power, without the Smith name carrying weight, he was invisible. This, Justin realized, was how Robine must have felt that morning. Invisible, disposable, a person reduced to a function, pleasant evening, nothing more, then erased when no longer convenient. The realization made him physically ill. He started attending a support group for people dealing with financial devastation, sat in church basements drinking bad coffee while strangers shared stories of bankruptcy and foreclosure, and learning to rebuild from nothing. A woman named Teresa talked about working 3 jobs to keep her kids fed after her husband emptied their accounts and disappeared. A man named David described sleeping in his car rather than burden his aging parents. Justin listened and learned that poverty wasn't just lacking money, it was the constant anxiety, the calculations that never ended, the exhaustion of choices that shouldn't be choices. "What brings you here?" the group leader asked during his 3rd session. "I lost everything," Justin said simply. "And I'm trying to understand what I did to deserve it." "That's the wrong question," Teresa said gently. "Try asking what you can learn from it." What could he learn? That privilege had made him cruel without realizing it. That he'd discarded people like they were obstacles instead of humans. That Robine's revenge wasn't excessive. It was proportional to the harm he'd caused, only he'd never bothered to measure that harm before. One evening, walking home from a particularly soul-crushing day of job rejections, Justin saw her. Robine emerging from a restaurant with 2 boys who could only be Prince and Harrison. They were dressed casually, jeans and hoodies, but they moved with the confidence of children who knew they were loved. Prince was gesticulating wildly, telling some story that made Robine laugh. Harrison walked slightly apart, more reserved, but his hand occasionally reached for his mother's like he needed the connection. Justin stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching his family, his family, exist in a world he'd forfeited the right to enter. Robine noticed him. Of course she did. He saw the recognition flash across her face, saw her body shift subtly, protectively toward the boys. Prince followed her gaze, looked directly at Justin with those impossible blue eyes. "Mama, who's that man?" "No one important, baby. Come on." She steered them toward a waiting car, but Harrison had turned too, studying Justin with an intensity that felt like being dissected. "He looks sad," Harrison observed. "The world is full of sad men who made themselves that way," Robine replied, loud enough for Justin to hear. "We don't owe them our tears." The car door closed. They drove away. Justin stood on the sidewalk until the cold seeped through his inadequate jacket, until his feet ached, until the streetlights flickered on and the city began its transformation from day to night. He'd seen his sons, beautiful, brilliant boys who'd inherited his eyes and her strength, and they'd looked at him like he was exactly what Robine said, no one important. That night, Justin started writing letters he knew he'd never send. "Dear Prince and Harrison, I'm sorry I wasn't there when you were born. I'm sorry I didn't fight to know you. I'm sorry I'm writing this instead of saying it to your faces because I'm still, after everything, a coward. He filled notebooks with these letters, apologies and explanations and desperate attempts to make sense of the choices that had led here. Sometimes he wrote to Robin, "I remember how you looked at me that night, like I could be someone worth knowing. I'm sorry I proved you wrong. I'm sorry I didn't prove you right." The letters helped nothing, solved nothing, but they kept him from disappearing entirely into the emptiness. Work continued to be scarce. Justin took a job cleaning office buildings at night, the kind of work he'd never imagined doing, which was precisely why he needed to do it. His supervisor was an immigrant woman named Esperanza, who'd built a small cleaning company from scratch, working double shifts until she could afford to hire help. "You're different from my usual hires," she said one night, watching him struggle with a commercial floor buffer. "How so?" "You move like someone who isn't used to physical labor, but you work hard, harder than you need to, like you're trying to punish yourself." Justin paused, considering this. "Maybe I am. Punishment doesn't teach, only consequences teach. You understand the difference?" He thought about it. Punishment was what he'd wanted, suffering for suffering's sake, pain to match pain, but consequences, those were different. Consequences meant understanding cause and effect, meant learning to see the ripples his actions created in other people's lives. "I'm learning," he said. Esperanza nodded. "Good. Learning is harder than suffering, but it lasts longer." Weeks became months. Justin's hands developed calluses. His bank account remained stubbornly low. His parents stopped calling, partly from disappointment, partly because he'd asked them to. He needed space from their expectations, room to figure out who he was without their definitions. One Saturday, he passed a children's hospital where volunteers were needed. On impulse, he signed up, started spending weekends reading to kids in the cancer ward, playing games with children who'd forgotten how to be children for a while. A little girl named Zara asked him why he looked so sad all the time. "Because I hurt people I loved," he told her honestly, "and I'm trying to figure out how to be better." "Did you say you're sorry?" "They won't let me. I haven't earned the right." Zara considered this seriously. "My daddy says sorry is just a word. You have to show people, not tell them." Wisdom from a child battling leukemia. Justin carried it home like a precious thing, turned it over in his mind through another lonely evening. Show people, not tell them. He couldn't approach Robin. She'd made that boundary crystal clear. Couldn't contact his sons. They didn't even know he existed as anything more than a sad stranger on a sidewalk. But he could show them eventually that he'd learned. That he'd changed not because he'd lost everything, but because he'd finally understood what he'd thrown away. Late that night, his phone buzzed with an unknown number, a text. "The boys asked about you. The stranger from the sidewalk. They wanted to know if you're all right. I told them you're nobody we need to worry about. Prove me wrong or prove me right. Your choice." No signature. None needed. Justin looked at that message for hours, parsing every word. Understanding this was as close to an opening as Robin would give. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just the smallest crack in the door, barely wide enough for light to pass through. He typed and deleted responses for an hour before settling on, "I will prove you wrong. However long it takes, whatever it costs." The reply came immediately. "It will cost everything, and it still might not be enough." Justin looked around his small apartment, at the life he'd built from the wreckage of his old one, at the calluses on his hands and the books from the library, and the simple meal he'd cooked himself, because takeout was a luxury now. He typed, "I know, I'm ready." But was he? Ready to spend years rebuilding himself into someone worthy of those two boys and their extraordinary mother? Ready to accept that even his best might never be enough? The rain started again, steady and persistent against his windows. Justin watched the water blur the city lights into abstract patterns and thought about that night, the beginning and the end, pleasure and pain, everything he'd had and everything he'd lost in the space between midnight and dawn. This time, he wouldn't run from the rain. He'd stand in it until it washed away everything false, everything proud, everything that made him the man who could look at Robine and call her just a fun night. This time, he'd let the rain remake him, or drown trying. Chapter 5. The Inheritance of Absence. Some men leave scars. The smart ones leave empires to their children. Prince and Harrison sat in their bedroom, a space that managed to be both luxurious and lived in, filled with books and art supplies, and the kind of organized chaos that came from having minds too active to be confined by tidiness. Their mother had given them separate rooms when they moved into the penthouse suite, but the boys had chosen to stay together, twin beds on opposite walls with a shared space between where they built kingdoms and solved problems and talked about things that bothered them. Tonight, what bothered them was the sad man from the sidewalk. "He had our eyes," Prince said, sketching in his notebook, a habit he had when thinking through complicated feelings. His pencil moved across paper, creating abstract shapes that somehow conveyed emotion better than words. Harrison was at his desk, laptop open, doing what he always did when curiosity struck: research. "Mama said he's nobody important." But she had that look. Which look? The one she gets when something matters more than she wants to admit. Like when Aunt Josephine's anniversary comes around and she pretends she's fine, but then makes that lemon cake she used to love. Prince set down his pencil. "You think he's important to her?" "Was important, maybe. Past tense." Harrison's fingers flew across the keyboard. "I'm trying to find photos of Mama from before us. See if he shows up anywhere." "That's kind of stalking." "It's research. There's a difference." But Harrison's searching yielded nothing. Their mother's digital footprint before Parish Global was surprisingly small. A few mentions in non-profit newsletters, some academic publications from college, nothing personal. It was like she'd been born the day she'd founded her company. No history before that mattered. "She protects her privacy hard," Harrison muttered, "even from us." "Can you blame her?" Prince asked. "We're not exactly quiet about our lives. Remember when you hacked the school's mainframe to prove their grading algorithm was biased?" "I was proving a point." "You were proving you're a show-off." They bickered with the ease of children who loved each other too much to truly fight, until a soft knock interrupted them. Robine entered, already dressed for bed, but clearly not planning to sleep anytime soon. She carried that tightness around her eyes that meant the day had cost more than she'd wanted to spend. "You two should be asleep," she said, but there was no heat in it. "Mama, can we ask you something?" Prince's voice was gentle, the tone he used when approaching sensitive subjects. "About our father." Robin's entire demeanor shifted. Not closed off exactly, but guarded. She sat on Prince's bed, gestured for Harrison to join them. "What do you want to know?" "Why doesn't he want us?" Harrison asked bluntly. Because subtlety had never been his strength. The question clearly hurt her. They watched their mother's face cycle through emotions before settling on determined honesty. "It's not that he doesn't want you. He doesn't know you. There's a difference." "You tried to tell him about us?" Prince asked. "I tried. Multiple times. But he'd already decided what his life should look like, and it didn't include room for surprises, especially not surprises like me." "What does that mean?" Robine hesitated, clearly weighing how much truth they could handle. "Your father comes from a family with specific expectations. Old money, old values, old limitations. I didn't fit into that picture, so he made sure I couldn't complicate it." Harrison's jaw set in that stubborn line that meant he was processing anger. "So he threw you away. He made a choice. We all make choices. Some we regret, some we don't. Either way, we live with consequences." "And we're consequences." Harrison's voice cracked slightly. "No, baby, no." Robine pulled him close, then Prince too, surrounding herself with her sons. "You are blessings, miracles, the best parts of my life. His loss, not yours, never yours." They sat like that for a while, 3 people who'd learned to be family without needing anyone else's permission or participation. Finally, Prince spoke. "We want to meet him." Robin pulled back, searching their faces. "Why?" "Not because we need him," Harrison clarified. "Because we need to see him for ourselves, understand what we came from, what you protected us from. And maybe," Prince added quietly, "show him what he lost. Not to be cruel, but so we can close that door knowing we tried." Robin looked at her sons, brilliant, empathetic, already more emotionally intelligent than most adults. They'd grown up without a father, yes, but they'd never grown up feeling less than because of it. She'd made sure of that. "If I arrange this," she said carefully, "it won't be comfortable, for any of us. He's not the man I knew that night. He's been through changes, necessary changes." "Because of you?" Harrison asked. "Because of consequences he'd avoided too long. I just made sure those consequences found him." The boys exchanged glances, that twin communication that happened beyond words. Some agreement passed between them. "We're ready," they said in unison. But Robin wasn't sure she was ready. Ready to watch her sons meet the man who'd rejected them before they'd even existed. Ready to see Justin face what he'd thrown away. Ready to test whether the suffering she'd orchestrated had actually taught him anything, or just broken him into smaller, sadder pieces. The next day at school, both boys were distracted. Their teachers noticed Prince staring out windows during literature class, Harrison making uncharacteristic mistakes in calculus. At lunch, they sat together at their usual table, picking at food neither wanted. "What if he's terrible?" Prince asked. "Then we know. Better than wondering. What if he's not terrible? What if he's just sad? Like the man on the sidewalk?" Harrison considered this. Then maybe that's worse, because then he had something worth keeping and he threw it away anyway. Their friend Aaliyah joined them, immediately sensing something wrong. "You two look like someone cancelled summer. What's going on?" The twins exchanged glances. They'd never told anyone about their father. It felt too private, too complicated. "We might be meeting our dad," Prince said finally. Aaliyah's eyes widened. "I didn't know you had contact with him." "We don't. We haven't. But Mama said, if we want to, we can." "Do you want to?" Harrison shrugged. "Want is the wrong word. Need, maybe. Like there's this piece of our story we don't know, and we need to read it before we can move forward." "That's deep, Harrison. Very philosophical." "I'm a deep guy." "You're a nerd." "Same thing." That evening, Robin called a family meeting. Just the 3 of them, sitting in the living room with hot chocolate and the kind of seriousness that made the space feel smaller. "I've thought about your request," she began, "and I've decided that if this is what you need, I'll arrange it, but on conditions." The boys nodded, waiting. "First, this happens when and where I choose. Neutral ground, public space, my timeline. Second, if at any point either of you feels uncomfortable, we leave. No explanations owed, no guilt necessary. Third, you understand that meeting him doesn't mean forgiving him or establishing relationship. It's just information gathering. Are we clear?" "Clear," they said together. "And one more thing." Robin's voice dropped, became more vulnerable than they usually heard. "Whatever happens, whatever you learn about him or me or the situation, remember that you are loved completely. His limitations have nothing to do with your worth. Nothing. Understood?" "Understood, Mama." She pulled out her phone, typed a message while they watched. The response came quickly. "He agrees to meet you next Saturday, the Children's Museum, noon. Neutral. Public. Appropriate." She looked up. "This is really happening." Harrison reached for his laptop immediately, probably planning to research everything about Justin Smith before the meeting. Prince just sat quietly, processing, his artist's mind already imagining scenarios and outcomes. "Mama," Prince asked, "are you scared?" Robin smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Terrified, baby, absolutely terrified." "Of what?" "That you'll be disappointed. Or worse, that you won't be. that he'll show you some version of himself I never got to see, and you'll wonder why I kept you from him. That won't happen, Harrison said with certainty. We know you. We trust you. Nothing he says or does will change that. But Robin knew children, even brilliant ones, were more complicated than their promises. She knew that meeting Justin might open doors in their hearts she couldn't control, might create questions and longings no amount of present love could erase. After the boys went to bed, she stood at her window looking out at Seattle's nightscape and allowed herself a moment of pure fear. What if this backfired? What if Justin charmed them the way he'd once charmed her? What if they decided his absence was her fault for not trying harder, for not being enough to make him stay? Her phone buzzed. A text from Justin. "Thank you for this. I promise I won't waste it." She replied, "This isn't for you. It's for them. Don't confuse the two." But even as she sent it, Robin wondered if she was being entirely honest, because part of her, a small, wounded part she tried to ignore, wanted to see what he'd become, wanted to know if suffering had taught him anything worth learning, wanted to understand if the man she'd glimpsed that rainy night had ever actually existed, or if it had all been fantasy painted in stormlight and champagne. Saturday loomed like a reckoning, for all of them. The day their separate stories would collide and create something new, something none of them could predict or control. Robin just hoped everyone survived the collision intact. Chapter 6. Begging with Empty Hands. Pride is the last thing you lose, right before you lose yourself. Justin stood outside the Children's Museum, hands shaking despite the mild temperature, wearing the best clothes he still owned, which wasn't saying much. The jacket was fraying at the cuffs, the shoes needed polish he couldn't afford, but everything was clean, pressed, the best approximation of presentable he could manage. He'd been there for 40 minutes already, too terrified to wait at home, too anxious to be late. Families flowed past him, parents with children, grandparents with grandchildren, the ordinary miracle of people who belonged to each other. Justin watched them with the hunger of someone looking through windows at lives he'd forfeited the right to live. His phone buzzed. "Robin, we're approaching from the north entrance. The boys know you'll be waiting at the fountain. Don't make this weird. Don't make this weird, as if there was any way for this not to be the strangest, most painful moment of his life." Then he saw them. Robin walked between Prince and Harrison, one hand resting lightly on each boy's shoulder, protective without being possessive, present without being intrusive. The boys looked older than in the distant photo he'd found, more real, more undeniably his. They had his bone structure, his coloring, but they moved with Robin's confidence, carried themselves with her dignity. They were beautiful, perfect, completely unknown to him. Justin's legs nearly buckled. Robin saw him first, her face carefully neutral, giving nothing away. She spoke to the boys, pointing in his direction. They turned to look, and Justin felt the weight of their assessment like physical pressure. They approached, stopped a few feet away, maintaining distance that felt both respectful and damning. "Boys," Robin said quietly, "this is Justin Smith. Justin, these are my sons, Prince and Harrison. My sons, not our sons." The distinction was intentional, brutal, accurate. "Hi," Justin managed, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." The boys exchanged glances, that twin communication he was already learning to recognize. Harrison spoke first, his voice direct and challenging. "Why now?" "I'm sorry? Why do you want to meet us now? What changed?" Justin looked at Robin, who offered no help, no rescue. This was his test, and he'd take it alone. "I didn't know you existed," he said honestly. "Not until recently. When I found out, I needed to see you, to understand what I'd missed, what I'd lost." "You didn't lose us," Prince said, gentler than his brother but no less firm. "You were never in the equation. We didn't happen to you. We happened with Mama for Mama." The words landed like physical blows. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm using the wrong language because I don't know the right language. I don't know how to talk about this." "Then why are we here?" Harrison pressed. Robin placed a hand on Harrison's shoulder. "Baby, give him a chance to answer." But Harrison shrugged her off gently. "No, Mama. You said we could ask him anything. I'm asking." Justin crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with the boys, ignoring the way his knees protested. "You're here because I need to apologize. Not to make myself feel better, but because you deserve to hear it. Your mother tried to tell me about you, multiple times. I blocked her. I turned her away. I made sure I wouldn't have to face the consequences of my actions. That was cowardice. That was cruel. And you both suffered because of my weakness." Silence. The boys stared at him, processing, judging. "Do you want to be our dad now?" Prince asked. The question hurt precisely because it was so reasonable, so childlike in its directness. "I want to be worthy of that title," Justin said carefully. "But I'm not. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I threw away that right before you were born." "Then what do you want?" Harrison demanded. "To show you that I'm trying, to let you see that I understand what I did wrong, to give you the chance to know where you came from, even if you decide it doesn't matter." "It doesn't matter," Harrison said flatly. "Harrison," Robin said softly. "It's true, Mama. We're fine. We've always been fine. We don't need him." "You're absolutely right," Justin agreed. "You don't need me. You have an extraordinary mother who's given you everything I never could. But maybe you deserve to have the whole picture, not for my sake, for yours." Prince studied Justin with those unsettling blue eyes. "What's your favorite color?" The question was so unexpected Justin blinked. "What?" "Your favorite color. If you want us to know you, start simple." "Blue, like the ocean on a clear day. Why?" "Mine is gold, like sunset on water. Harrison's is green, like forests. See? Now we know something about each other that isn't about mistakes and missing." Harrison rolled his eyes but didn't contradict his brother. They walked through the museum together, an awkward constellation of people trying to figure out their orbit. Robin stayed close but gave space, watchful without interfering. The boys asked questions, some innocuous, some devastating. "What do you do for work?" Harrison asked. "Right now I clean office buildings, do some consulting work when I can find it. It's not glamorous, but it's honest." "Mama says honest work is the only kind worth doing," Prince offered. "Your mama is right about most things." "Most things?" Robin arched an eyebrow. "Just most." Justin met her gaze. "All things. Your mama is right about all things." Something flickered in her expression, not forgiveness, but maybe acknowledgement. They stopped at an exhibit about inheritance, ironically enough, information about genetics, family traits, learned versus innate behaviors. Harrison read every placard with intense focus, while Prince sketched the DNA helix display in his notebook. "We got your eyes," Harrison said without looking up from his reading, "and Mama's nose, and apparently we're predisposed to your family's heart disease, so we need to watch our cholesterol." The casual way he said it, your family's heart disease, like Justin's medical history, was just data to be catalogued, not evidence of connection. "Do you have questions?" Justin asked. "About medical history, family background, anything that might matter for your health?" "Already researched it," Harrison replied. "Found your family's medical records through public databases. We're good." Of course they had. These were Rabin's children, brilliant, resourceful, capable of solving their own problems without waiting for absent fathers to provide answers. Lunch was awkward. They sat in the museum cafe, the boys ordering confidently while Justin fumbled with the menu, calculating what he could afford. Robin noticed, paid for everyone before he could protest. "Consider it child support for the years you missed," she said quietly, and the words stung precisely because they were fair. "What's it like?" Prince asked suddenly. "Losing everything?" "Prince," Robin warned. "What?" "He said we could ask anything." Justin set down his sandwich. It's like waking up from a dream and realizing nothing was real. The respect, the friendship, the love, all of it was attached to what I had, not who I was. When that disappeared, so did everything else. Do you hate Mama for it? No, I'm grateful to her. Both boys looked skeptical. Harrison snorted. Grateful she destroyed your life. Grateful she made me face consequences I'd spent my whole life avoiding. Grateful she cared enough about you to protect you from who I was. Grateful she's raising you to be better than I ever was. Robine's expression was unreadable, but her hand tightened around her coffee cup. Would you change it? Prince asked. If you could go back, would you answer Mama's calls? Keep us? The question everyone wanted answered, wrapped in a child's directness. Justin looked at Robine, then at his sons. Yes, without hesitation, but I can't go back. I can only go forward. And going forward means accepting that you don't owe me anything. Not your time, not your forgiveness, not your love. I owe you, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to pay that debt. You can't pay it, Harrison said matter-of-factly. Some debts are too big. That's just math. Then I'll die trying. That's also math. The afternoon wound down. The boys grew tired, their questions less pointed, their guards lowering slightly. As they prepared to leave, Prince did something unexpected. He pulled out his sketchbook, tore out a page, handed it to Justin. It was a drawing of the four of them at the museum, rendered in quick, confident strokes. In the sketch, Justin stood slightly apart from the family unit, but there were lines connecting them, faint, tentative, but present. So you don't forget today, Prince said. Justin's throat closed around words that wouldn't come. He could only nod. Outside, the Seattle rain had started. Of course it had. Robine opened umbrellas for herself and the boys, hesitated, then handed a third to Justin. You'll need this, she said. Their fingers brushed in the exchange. The touch lasted half a second but felt like forgiveness might feel if forgiveness were ever this simple. Can we do this again? Justin asked, hating how desperate he sounded. Sometime? The boys looked at Robine. She studied Justin for a long moment, seeing something in his face or his posture or his eyes. Maybe, she said, if they want to, when they're ready. On their terms, not yours. Of course, yes, thank you. They walked toward their car, a family unit complete without him. Justin stood in the rain, watching them go, clutching Prince's drawing like it was the most precious thing he'd ever held, because it was. His phone buzzed, a text from Robine. You did better than I expected, but expectations were low. Don't disappoint them again. He typed back, I won't. I swear I won't. But even as he sent it, Justin knew promises from him meant nothing. Only actions mattered, only proof. Only the slow, painful work of becoming someone worthy of those two brilliant boys and their magnificent mother. He walked home through the rain, getting soaked because he'd forgotten how to use an umbrella, forgotten everything except the feeling of his sons looking at him with their inherited eyes, seeing him clearly, judging him fairly. They'd found him wanting, but they'd also found him trying. It was more than he deserved, and less than they needed. The work of closing that gap would take everything he had and more than he possessed. Justin was finally ready to pay that price. Chapter 7. The Price of Tomorrow. Forgiveness isn't given, it's earned one broken piece at a time. 3 months passed like a slow education in humility. Justin worked his night shifts at the cleaning company, his consulting gigs during the day, and spent his remaining hours trying to become someone worth knowing. He started volunteering at the Children's Hospital, the same one where Prince and Harrison visited weekly with their mother for a charity reading program Parish Global sponsored. Justin hadn't known this when he signed up, had stumbled into it accidentally, but Robine's assistant had called him the next day with a pointed message. Ms. Parrish is aware of your volunteer work. She appreciates that you're not using it to approach the boys. Continue maintaining appropriate boundaries. So he did. When he saw them in the halls, Prince reading to a little girl with leukemia, Harrison building robots with kids in physical therapy, He nodded politely and kept his distance. He didn't insert himself into their lives, didn't force interactions, didn't exploit proximity for access. It was torture, beautiful, necessary torture. The hospital staff knew him as Just Justin, the guy who showed up every Saturday and Thursday, who read to the kids who couldn't sleep, who played chess with teenagers angry at their diagnoses, who cleaned up vomit and changed sheets and did the unglamorous work nobody else wanted. "You're different from other volunteers," a nurse named Patricia told him one evening. "Most people do this for their conscience or their resume. You do it like you're trying to save your soul." "Maybe I am," Justin admitted. He'd started therapy, the sliding scale kind at community health centers, sitting across from a counselor named Dr. Rashida, who didn't care about his last name or his former wealth, only about the work he was willing to do. "Tell me about shame," she said during one session. "It's heavy, like carrying rocks in your chest. Every time I think about my sons growing up without me, another rock gets added. Shame is useful when it motivates change, destructive when it becomes identity, which is yours." Justin had to think about that. It was identity. I was the man who failed, the coward, the villain. But I'm trying to make it motivational instead, trying to let it show me what to change rather than who to be. That's good work, Justin. Hard work. The hardest work was accepting that some things couldn't be fixed, only acknowledged. He couldn't give Prince and Harrison their first steps or first words, couldn't erase the nights Robin had cried alone, or struggled alone, or triumphed alone. The past was immutable, carved in stone, impervious to regret. All he could do was show up for the present and try to be worthy of whatever future they might allow him. His parents had stopped speaking to him entirely after he'd refused their demand that he fight Robin's takeover in court. "She humiliated this family," his mother had said, "and you're just accepting it?" "I'm accepting consequences," he'd replied. "You should try it sometime." That had been the last conversation. Their disappointment in him had finally metastasized into something colder, indifference. He was no longer their son in any meaningful sense, just a reminder of failure they preferred to forget. Strangely, the rejection hurt less than he'd expected. Maybe because he'd learned what real parenthood looked like by watching Robin from a distance. Real parents showed up, protected, sacrificed. His parents had done none of those things. They'd simply possessed him, molded him, used him as an extension of their ambitions. He didn't want to be that kind of father if he ever got the chance to be a father at all. One Thursday at the hospital, Justin was reading Where the Wild Things Are to a group of kids when he heard familiar voices in the hallway. The boys arriving for their reading session. His heart rate spiked, but he kept reading, kept his voice steady, didn't look up, until a small voice said, That's Mr. Justin." He looked up. Harrison stood in the doorway, Prince beside him, both staring with expressions too complex to pass. "Hi," Justin said quietly. "I didn't know you'd be here today." "We're here every Thursday," Harrison said, something like accusation in his tone. "Are you following us?" "No, I volunteer Saturdays and Thursdays. Have for months before I knew your schedule. I can switch days if this makes you uncomfortable." The boys exchanged one of their silent conversations. "You read to kids?" Prince asked. "When they need it. Sometimes they just need someone to sit with them. So I do that too." A little boy in the group, Samuel, battling a rare blood disorder, tugged Justin's sleeve. "Are those your kids?" The question froze everyone. Justin looked at Prince and Harrison, giving them power to define the relationship. "We're getting to know each other," Harrison said carefully. "He's someone who's trying," Prince added, gentler. Samuel, blessed with the obliviousness of childhood, just shrugged. "Cool. Can you finish the story?" "Max just got to where the wild things are." Justin finished the story, hyper-aware of Prince and Harrison watching from the doorway. When he was done, the kids dispersed to their various activities, leaving Justin to clean up books and toys. The boys approached. "You're here a lot?" Prince asked. Twice a week usually, more if they're short-staffed. Why? Justin set down the books he'd been stacking. Because I spent my whole life taking up space without adding value. This is a small way to balance that equation. You think it balances? Harrison's tone suggested skepticism. No, nothing balances what I did, but maybe it makes the world slightly less worse than if I'd stayed who I was. You're not that person anymore, Prince said, surprising everyone, including himself. Prince, Harrison warned. What? He's not. That person wouldn't be here, wouldn't show up when nobody's watching. The simple observation hit Justin harder than any elaborate forgiveness could have. Robin appeared then, somehow knowing exactly when she was needed. Boys, time to set up for our session. Mama, did you know Justin volunteers here? Prince asked. I'm aware. Her tone gave nothing away. Were you testing him? Harrison demanded, that analytical mind making connections. Seeing if he'd respect boundaries? I was seeing what he'd do when nobody was watching, when there was nothing to gain. She looked at Justin directly for the first time that evening. So far, he's made acceptable choices. Not good choices, acceptable ones. The distinction was important. Can we talk to him sometimes? Prince asked. Not like planned meetings, just if we run into him here. Robin considered this, weighing factors Justin couldn't see. If both of you want to, and if he maintains appropriate boundaries, then yes. But the moment either of you feels uncomfortable, we stop. Agreement? Agreement, the boys said together. After they left for their reading session, Justin sat in the quiet playroom, hands shaking slightly with the adrenaline crash. Acceptable choices, casual interactions allowed, small, hard-won progress. His phone buzzed. Robin. Don't make me regret this. He typed back, I won't. Thank you for trusting me this much. I don't trust you. I trust them to protect themselves. There's a difference. Fair enough. Over the following weeks, the hospital became a kind of neutral ground. Justin would be there doing his volunteer work, never seeking out the boys, never manufacturing encounters, just existing in his designated space. Sometimes Prince and Harrison would stop by. Sometimes they'd just wave from a distance. Sometimes they'd sit and ask questions while Justin cleaned or organized or prepared activity stations. What was your childhood like? Prince asked one evening. Privileged and hollow. I had everything except reasons to be grateful for it. Do you miss it? I miss the ease. I don't miss the person it let me be. Harrison, always more skeptical, asked harder questions. If you could have everything back, but it meant never knowing about us, would you take it? No. That's easy to say now. It's true now. That's all I've got. They were testing him, these brilliant boys, probing for weaknesses, inconsistencies, signs that his transformation was performance rather than genuine. Justin let them, answered every question honestly, accepted every judgment they rendered. One Saturday, Prince brought his sketchbook, worked on a drawing while Justin read to other kids. At the end of the session, he showed Justin the result, a portrait that captured something in Justin's face, some combination of sadness and determination and hope. You're really talented, Justin said, awed. I know. Mama says I got it from her Aunt Josephine. She was an artist too. Prince paused. Do we get anything from you besides blue eyes and heart stuff we need to watch? The question could have been cruel, but wasn't, just curiosity, a child trying to map the geography of his inheritance. I don't know, Justin admitted. I never developed enough of a real self to know what was inherently me versus what was conditioned into me. Maybe you got my capacity for messing up spectacularly. Prince laughed, surprising them both. Harrison definitely got that. He once reprogrammed the school's entire security system as a science project. That sounds like his mother's genius, not my disaster. Can't it be both? Could it? Could they inherit both his weaknesses and Robin's strengths, blend them into something new and better? The thought was almost unbearably hopeful. Time passed in small increments. Justin kept working, kept showing up, kept proving through action what words couldn't convey. He started a small business, ethical consulting for companies trying to rebuild after crises, using his own destruction as a case study. It wasn't lucrative, but it was honest, and it grew slowly through word of mouth. He lived modestly, saved what he could, donated the rest to the children's hospital and educational non-profits. The apartment stayed small, the car stayed absent, the life stayed simple. Not as punishment, but as choice. This was who he was now, someone who understood that wealth was measured in different currencies than he'd been taught. One evening, leaving the hospital when he heard shouting, an older man, clearly intoxicated, was harassing people in the parking lot. Security was approaching, but the man had grabbed a woman's purse, was yanking it away from her. Justin didn't think, just moved. Got between the man and his victim, took a punch that split his lip, managed to wrestle the purse back, held the attacker until security arrived. The woman was shaking, but unhurt. "Thank you, God, thank you. Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine, but you're bleeding." Justin touched his lip, felt the warm, wet evidence of impact. "I've had worse." He didn't realize Prince and Harrison had witnessed everything until they rushed over, Robine close behind, all three wearing identical expressions of concern. "Are you okay?" Prince asked. "What were you thinking?" Harrison demanded. "I wasn't thinking, I just reacted." Robine examined his face with professional detachment, though her hands were gentle. "You need ice, and probably stitches." "I'm fine. You're bleeding on my children." "You're not fine." She drove him to the ER. The boys insisted on coming. Robine allowed it. And suddenly, they were all sitting together in a waiting room while a doctor numbed Justin's lip for stitches. "That was really brave," Prince said quietly. "That was really stupid," Harrison countered. "He could have had a weapon." "It wasn't bravery. The brave thing would have been doing it when there was something to lose. I have nothing to lose." "You have us," Prince said, then looked startled by his own words. "I mean, kind of. We're getting to know you. That's something." Justin's eyes stung, and he blamed it on the split lip, even though they both knew better. After his stitches, they got late-night diner food. Greasy, perfect, exactly what the moment required. The boys asked questions about the fight, whether he'd been scared, how he'd learned to throw a punch. He hadn't. Pure luck and desperation. Robine stayed quiet, watching, assessing. When she drove him home, the boys were asleep in the back seat. The rain had started again, gentle this time, washing the city clean. "Thank you," Justin said, "for tonight, for letting them come, for everything." "Don't thank me. You made your own opportunities." She paused. "They like you. That's not forgiveness, and it doesn't erase anything. But they like you. I like them. They're extraordinary. They are, and they're mine." She looked at him, rain-blurred streetlights playing across her face. "Don't forget that, Justin. Whatever happens from here, they're mine first. You're earning chances, not rights." "I understand. I hope so, because if you hurt them, what I did to your company will seem like mercy compared to what comes next." She wasn't joking. Justin nodded, accepting the threat as reasonable, fair, exactly what a real mother would promise. When he got out of the car, Prince woke briefly. "Justin, come to my art show next month? I'm exhibiting some pieces. If your mother says it's okay, I'd be honored." Robine didn't answer immediately, but finally, "Send me the details, Prince. We'll see." It wasn't yes, but it wasn't no. Justin walked into his small apartment, touched his stitched lip, and felt something dangerous blooming in his chest. Not quite forgiveness, not even close to redemption. Just the possibility that someday, somewhere in the distant future, he might earn the right to be part of their story, instead of just its cautionary tale. The work continued. The showing up continued, the earning continued, one broken piece at a time. Chapter 8. When Rain Remembers. Second chances don't arrive like miracles. They're built with bloodied hands and broken pride. The storm hit Seattle with unusual ferocity, not the gentle, perpetual drizzle the city wore like a second skin, but something angrier, more biblical. Lightning cracked the sky into electric fragments, while thunder rolled through the streets like divine percussion, the kind of storm that made people remember nature's indifference to human plans. Justin was working late at a client's office downtown, one of the ethical consulting contracts he'd built slowly, carefully, on reputation earned rather than inherited. The project was going well, better than expected, and he'd been so focused on finishing the proposal that he'd ignored the weather warnings, the darkening sky, the first warning drops. By the time he left the building, the deluge had begun. He stood under the inadequate awning, watching water turn the streets into rushing rivers, and felt the past pressing against the present like a fingerprint on glass. Years ago, another storm, another moment of standing helpless while the sky fell apart. The difference was, back then, he'd had somewhere warm to retreat to, someone to share the storm with. Now he had an apartment across town, no car, and a bus system that had already suspended service due to flooding. His phone buzzed. Multiple texts from Robine. "Where are you?" "Boys are worried. Hospital called asking if you were okay." "Justin, answer your phone." He called back immediately. "I'm fine. Downtown, waiting out the storm." "The news says downtown is flooding. You need to leave that area." "I'm trying. No buses, no ride shares available. I'll walk when it clears a bit." A pause. Then, "Where are you exactly?" he told her. She made a frustrated sound that was somehow endearing despite the circumstances. "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." "Robin, you don't have to. The boys are scared. They saw the news about flash flooding downtown and remembered you were working in that area. Do you want to tell them you drowned because you were too proud to accept a ride?" She hung up before he could argue. 20 minutes later, her car pulled up. The same luxury SUV, looking entirely too clean and expensive against the apocalyptic backdrop. She leaned across to open the passenger door. "Get in before you wash away." Justin climbed in, immediately aware of how wet he was, how he was dripping water all over her leather seats. "I'm sorry. I'm ruining your car." "It's just water and money. Neither matters right now." She pulled away from the curb, navigating the flooded streets with focused competence. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the deluge, making visibility nearly impossible. "This is insane," Justin muttered. "You shouldn't have come out in this." "What would you have done?" "Swum home. Waited it out, found shelter. The news is predicting this will last for hours. Flash flood warnings are serious." She glanced at him. "Besides, the boys made me promise to make sure you were safe. Apparently you've become someone they worry about." The words settled in his chest like warmth. They were halfway across the city when a massive crack of lightning hit somewhere close, too close, and the road ahead suddenly flooded worse, water rising fast enough to see it move. Robine swore, pulled a sharp turn down a side street, but it was already too late. The SUV's engine choked, sputtered, died. They sat in suddenly rising water, rain hammering the roof like nature's drumline. "We need to get out," Robine said, already unbuckling. "Water's rising too fast." They abandoned the car, wading through knee-deep water toward higher ground. Robine stumbled on debris hidden beneath the surface. Justin caught her arm, steadied her, and for a moment they were pressed together, soaked and struggling and alive in the way that danger makes you alive. They found shelter in a covered parking structure, one of the upper levels where water hadn't reached yet. Other refugees from the storm had gathered there. Families, couples, solo travelers all huddled together waiting for the weather to pass. Robine called her driver to arrange pickup once the flooding receded, checked on the boys via FaceTime to prove they were both safe. Prince and Harrison's worried faces filled her screen, relief evident when they saw Justin beside their mother. "You're both okay?" Harrison asked. "Both fine, baby. Just wet. We'll be home soon." "Mr. Justin is with you?" Prince peered at the screen. "He needed a rescue, so I rescued him." "Mama the hero," Prince said with a smile that was Justin's smile. genetics making their mark in the curve of lips and the light in eyes. After she hung up, Robin leaned against the concrete wall, exhausted and soaked, and somehow still magnificent. "Thank you," Justin said, "for coming for me. I know you did it for them, not me." "I did it for them," she confirmed, "but that doesn't mean I wanted you to drown." They sat in silence for a while, listening to rain and distant thunder and the murmur of other stranded people sharing shelter. "This reminds you of that night," Robin said finally. "Not a question. Every storm reminds me." "Me too." She pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. "I was terrified that night, not of you, of how much I wanted to stay. How right it felt when nothing in my life had felt right in so long." Justin turned to look at her, really look at her, seeing past the armor to the woman underneath. "I was terrified too. That's why I said what I said the next morning, because you made me feel things I didn't know how to handle, things that would have required me to become someone different, someone braver, so I destroyed it before it could destroy me. It destroyed you anyway, just took longer." "Yeah." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Turns out you can't run from consequences. They just multiply with interest." Another silence, this one less hostile, more something complicated, raw. "I wanted to hate you," Robin said softly. "When I found out I was pregnant, I wanted to hate you so much, but I couldn't, because you'd shown me glimpses of someone real that night, someone kind and funny and present. I kept thinking, if I could just talk to you, remind you of who you'd been for those hours, you'd want to be part of this." "You tried." "I tried so hard, Justin. Called until you blocked me, showed up until you had me banned, wrote emails that went unanswered. I tried until I had no dignity left, until my aunt finally said, 'Baby, you can't make someone choose you, you can only choose yourself.' So you chose yourself, and you built something magnificent. I built something necessary for them, for me, because if I was going to survive your rejection, I needed to become someone who couldn't be rejected, someone so successful, so powerful, that no one could ever dismiss me as insignificant again. You were never insignificant. To you I was. That morning, I saw it in your eyes. You'd already filed me away under pleasant diversion. I wasn't a person with feelings and futures. I was just a fun night you needed to end cleanly. The truth of it sat between them, like a third presence." "I can't undo that," Justin said. "I can't give you back your dignity or your peace or the years you struggled alone. I can only tell you that I see it now. See you now. See what I did and what it cost." "Then why are you here?" Robin asked, and there was something desperate in the question. "Why are you still trying when you know it's unforgivable?" Because they deserve to see someone try anyway, someone fail and keep trying, someone acknowledge mistakes without running from them. I'm not doing this for redemption. I'm doing it so they don't grow up thinking cowardice is acceptable. Are you better now? I'm different. Whether that's better is for you and them to judge." Robin was quiet for a long time, watching rain create patterns on the concrete. "You volunteering at the hospital, the consulting work, living in that tiny apartment when you could probably leverage your name for something better. That's all real?" "All real. I'm not performing, Robin. I'm just trying to live like I understand what I cost the world. What you cost me. What I cost you. Them, myself, everyone connected to my choices." She turned to look at him. And in the dim light of the parking structure, her eyes were the same as they'd been that night. Infinite, beautiful, seeing too much. "The boys like you," she said. "That complicates things." "Does it have to?" "Yes, because I can forgive you for what you did to me. That's my wound to heal. But I can't forgive you for what you did to them. For every birthday you missed, every nightmare I comforted alone, every time they asked why they didn't have a daddy. That's their wound, not mine. And I can't heal it for them. I understand." "Do you? Really?" "Because they're starting to trust you, Justin. And if you disappoint them, if you prove to be the man I feared you were, instead of the man you're trying to be, I will destroy more than your company. I will destroy any chance you ever have at peace. I'm not pretending, Robine. This is who I am now. The rain continued. Hours passed. Other people came and went as different areas became safe to traverse. Eventually, Robine's driver texted that he could reach them, that the flooding had receded enough for careful navigation. They stood, prepared to leave, and Robine hesitated. That night, the rain, the conversation, the connection. Any of it real for you? Justin met her eyes. It was the most real thing I'd ever felt. That's why I ran from it. That's why I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. She nodded, accepting this, and they walked to the waiting car together. In the back seat, sitting careful inches apart, Robine said quietly, "The boys want you at Prince's art show next week. Officially, not as someone we happened to run into, but as someone invited. I'd be honored. Don't be honored. Be present, be consistent, be the person they need you to be." "I will, I promise." "Your promises are still worth less than your actions. Prove it there." The car pulled up to Justin's building. As he prepared to leave, Robin caught his hand. Brief, electric, gone before he could process it. "Thank you for being scared that night," she said. "At least that was honest." She drove away, leaving Justin standing in the rain, hand still warm from her touch, understanding that something had shifted. Not forgiveness, not even close to reconciliation, but acknowledgement. Recognition. The beginning of seeing each other as more than hero and villain, victim and perpetrator. Just two people who'd shared one perfect night before sunrise brought reality and ruin. The rain continued to fall. Justin stood in it, let it soak through his already wet clothes, and thought about second chances, how they weren't given, weren't earned, weren't deserved, how they were built piece by piece from the wreckage of first chances wasted. The storm passed. The sky cleared. The city began its work of cleaning up and moving forward. Justin went inside to dry off, planning what he'd wear to an art show, how he'd be present without being intrusive, how he'd prove through action what words could never convey. The work continued. It would always continue, but for the first time he thought maybe, just maybe, there was something worth working toward, instead of just away from. Chapter 9. Rebuilding from ashes. Love isn't about the fall. It's about who stays to sweep up the broken glass. Prince's art show arrived on a crisp Saturday evening. Justin spent the day preparing, not just his appearance, but his mindset. This wasn't about him. It was about showing up for a brilliant child who'd extended an invitation that meant more than gallery openings or art sales ever could. The gallery in Pioneer Square hummed with sophisticated energy. Collectors mingled with educators. Critics studied pieces with practiced eyes. And at the center of it all stood Prince, dressed in slacks and a button-down, fielding questions with the poise of someone far older than his years. Justin arrived exactly on time, not early enough to seem eager, not late enough to seem careless. He'd worn his thrift store suit, polished his aging shoes, and carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who'd learned that presence mattered more than presentation. The walls showcased Prince's extraordinary talent, portraits of hospital children rendered with compassion and depth, Seattle landscapes where rain became light, abstract pieces that spoke directly to emotion, and there, tucked in a corner, the small sketch from the museum, their family constellation with its tentative connecting lines, labeled Possibility. Justin stood before it, throat tight with recognition. "You came." Prince appeared beside him, eyes bright with something between hope and relief. "I promised I would. Lots of people promise things." Prince looked at the drawing. "You actually show up." Before Justin could respond, Harrison appeared, tugging uncomfortably at his collar. "Too many people looking at art." "Give me numbers any day." "Numbers judge too," Justin said. "They're just more honest about it." Harrison grinned despite himself. "True, 2 plus 2 never pretends to be 5. Robine joined them, stunning in a black dress that managed to be both elegant and armor. She greeted Justin with a professional nod, her expression carefully neutral. "Thank you for coming. The boys appreciate it." "I appreciate being invited." The evening unfolded with the careful choreography of high-culture events. Justin stayed appropriately in the background, watching Prince shine, watching Harrison provide protective support, watching Robin orchestrate everything with the precision of someone who'd mastered the art of being both parents at once. An art critic approached Justin during a quiet moment. "Are you family? You have the same eyes as the young artist." The question landed like a test. Justin looked toward Robin, who'd overheard, waiting to see what he'd claim. "I'm someone who's trying to earn that title," Justin said carefully. "Right now, I'm just someone who's incredibly proud of his work." The critic nodded and moved on. Robin's expression softened microscopically, acknowledgement if not approval. Later, when the crowd had thinned slightly, Robin approached him near the refreshment table. "You could have claimed them just now. I wouldn't have contradicted you." "I know, but it wouldn't have been true yet. Truth matters more than convenient fiction." "When did you learn that?" "When I lost everything built on convenient fictions." She studied him, weighing something internal. "My mother is here. She wants to meet you." Justin's stomach dropped. "Your mother?" "She flew in from Atlanta for the show. She's known about you since the beginning. What you did, what I've been doing to make you pay for it." Robin paused. "She helped me plan the acquisition, spent 3 years watching me position every piece, strategize every move. She knows exactly who you were, and she has strong opinions about who you claim to be now." Dorothy Parrish was elegant and sharp-eyed, assessing Justin like a specimen under glass. "Mr. Smith." She didn't offer her hand. "I'm Dorothy Parrish. Mrs. Parrish. I'm sure you've heard nothing flattering about me." "Call me Dorothy." "And you're correct. Nothing flattering at all. I watched my daughter cry herself to sleep while pregnant because you blocked her calls. I held those babies when they were born while she recovered alone. I helped her build Parrish Global specifically so she'd have the power to make you face consequences." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "So tell me why I shouldn't encourage my daughter to keep you at arm's length permanently." Justin met her gaze without flinching. "You absolutely should. I don't deserve access to them. Every choice I made back then was cowardice, disguised as pragmatism. But they deserve the chance to know where they came from, even if it's disappointing." Disappointing is a mild word for abandonment. There is no mild word for what I did. I'm not trying to minimize it. Then what are you trying to do? Show them that people can change, that mistakes don't have to define futures, that someone can break and rebuild into something better. Dorothy studied him with unnerving intensity. "My daughter spent 3 years planning your destruction. 3 years of careful acquisition, strategic positioning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She didn't act impulsively. She built a case, gathered every debt, positioned every piece until your entire empire existed at her pleasure. Do you understand what that level of focus means? It means I hurt her badly enough that 3 years felt like appropriate preparation time. It means she's not someone who forgives easily or quickly, which is why I'm concerned about this." Dorothy gestured between them. "She's allowing you proximity to those boys. She's been watching you for over a year, testing you in ways you probably don't realize. But my question remains, are you genuine or just better at performance?" "I don't know how to prove genuine, except through time and consistency." "Then you'd better be prepared for a lot of both, because I'm watching too, Mr. Smith. And unlike my daughter, who has a kind heart beneath her armor, I'm not inclined toward forgiveness." Dorothy's expression hardened. "You hurt my baby. You threw away my grandsons. I watched those wounds bleed. So forgive me if I'm not impressed by a year of good behavior." "I don't expect you to be impressed." "Good. Then we understand each other." Dorothy started to walk away, then paused. "But I'll say this. You showed up tonight when you could have made excuses. You deflected credit when you could have claimed connection. Those are small things, but they're noted. Keep doing small things right, and maybe in a few more years, we'll have a different conversation. She walked away, leaving Justin uncertain whether he'd been given conditional approval or a warning. Robin appeared at his elbow. She's protective, as she should be. She doesn't trust you yet, but the fact that she agreed to meet you at all means something. It took me months to convince her. The evening wound down with Prince's work, receiving enthusiastic responses, several pieces selling, connections made. As they prepared to leave, Harrison asked casually, "You coming to my robotics competition next month?" The question, so normal and extraordinary simultaneously, nearly undid Justin. "If you want me there, absolutely. I want you there. Someone should witness me dominate the autonomous vehicle category." At Justin's building, Robin paused before he got out. "You handled Dorothy well. She expected defensiveness or dismissiveness. You gave her neither. She's protecting her family. I respect that. She said you might be genuine. From her, that's practically a blessing." Robin's expression was unreadable. "Keep proving it, Justin, to all of us." That night, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. "This is Dorothy. You have my daughter's number. If you ever hurt those boys, you'll wish corporate destruction was the worst thing that happened to you. We clear?" Justin typed back, "Crystal clear, and thank you for caring about them enough to threaten me." The response was immediate. "I'm not threatening you. I'm promising you. There's a difference." He fell asleep thinking about the difference between threats and promises, between showing up once and showing up forever. The work continued. The proving continued. The earning continued. Harrison's robotics competition came. Justin cheered from the stands beside Robin and Prince as Harrison's autonomous vehicle navigated obstacles flawlessly. Afterward, Harrison's understated pride, "It performed within expected parameters," made Justin smile at the boy's calculated modesty, masking genuine triumph. Weeks became months. The hospital remained neutral ground where casual interactions happened naturally. Sometimes the boys would stop by while Justin volunteered. Sometimes they'd just wave. Each interaction built familiarity, brick by careful brick. One Thursday evening, Robin called unexpectedly. "I have a work crisis. Conference call I can't postpone. The boys are home, but Prince has a fever. Can you—" She stopped, seemingly surprised she was asking. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Justin arrived at the penthouse for the first time, was let in by a clearly miserable Prince wrapped in blankets on the couch. Harrison hovered nearby, worried, but trying to hide it. "Mama said you'd come," Prince said weakly, "but I didn't think you actually would." "Of course I came. Where's the medicine?" For the next 2 hours, while Robin handled her crisis on a conference call in her office, Justin did the unglamorous work of parenthood. He convinced Prince to take medicine, made bland soup, changed sweat-soaked sheets, and sat reading aloud until the fever broke slightly. Harrison observed all of this with analytical attention, clearly assessing. When Robin finally emerged from her office, exhausted and apologetic, she found Prince sleeping peacefully, Harrison doing homework at the kitchen table, and Justin quietly cleaning up the sickroom debris. "I didn't ask you to clean," she said softly. "I know, but it needed doing, and you were busy keeping your company running." He met her eyes. "This is what showing up looks like, Robin, not just the good moments." Something shifted in her expression. Not quite trust, but acknowledgement that maybe, possibly, he meant what he'd been showing. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for calling me." Another evening, Harrison was stuck on advanced calculus homework. Robin was delayed at the office. Harrison called Justin in frustration. "Mama would know this, but she's stuck in traffic. Can you help?" "I can try, but I might not know the answer. Just be here. I think better when someone's here." Justin arrived to find Harrison surrounded by papers, frustrated and tired. They worked through the problem together, Or rather, Harrison worked through it while Justin asked clarifying questions, admitted when he didn't understand, and praised Harrison's logic when breakthroughs happened. "You're not actually helping," Harrison said at one point, but there was no heat in it. "I'm being present while you help yourself. That's different." "Yeah, it is." Harrison looked at him. "Mama does this too. Just sits with me until I figure it out. Says sometimes help is just witnessing the work." "Your mama is smart." "She is, about most things." Harrison paused. "She was right about giving you a chance." The admission from Harrison's skeptical, analytical mind meant more than elaborate declarations could have. Months accumulated into patterns. Justin became a fixture they could rely on, not for grand gestures, but for showing up when the dryer broke, when someone needed a ride, when homework defeated patience, when fevers spiked at inconvenient times. He learned that Prince liked his toast slightly burnt, that Harrison needed exactly 8 minutes of silence after waking before conversation was welcome, that Robin took her coffee black and preferred honesty to comfort even when truth was hard. He also learned gradually about the fate of his parents. Overheard a conversation at a charity event he was volunteering at, someone mentioning the Smiths had sold their estate, moved to a smaller condo in Bellevue. His mother's charity board positions quietly disappeared. Later, driving past their old neighborhood, Justin thought about Richard and Catherine. They'd been forced to sell everything to cover debts Robin's acquisition had unearthed, their social status evaporating like morning fog. His mother now organized bridge games instead of galas, her disappointment a constant background noise in their reduced circumstances. They hadn't learned humility, they'd simply purchased a smaller, less loud version of their old pride. It confirmed for Justin that his path, total loss and rebuilding, had been the only way forward. You couldn't learn by having less. You had to have nothing to understand everything. One evening, after months of this slow accumulation of trust, Robin asked Justin to stay after the boys went to bed. "We need to talk," she said, pouring tea with deliberate hands. Justin's heart rate spiked, but he stayed quiet, letting her lead. "The boys want to ask you something important, but before they do, I need to know where your head is." "I'm listening." "They want to introduce you as their father, not someone we know. Their father, to their friends, their teachers, their world." She looked at him directly. "That's permanent, Justin. That's not something they can take back if you disappoint them later, so I need to know if you're ready for that weight." Justin set down his tea carefully. "I've been ready since the moment I met them. But are you ready? This affects you too." "It does, which is why I need to know. Is this enough? Being their father, being in their lives, but maybe never being more than that to me. Can you accept that possibility?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Justin considered carefully. "A year ago, I would have needed guarantees, would have wanted some promise of where this was heading. But I've learned something from watching you raise them. Love isn't about what you get, it's about what you give. If all I ever am to you is the father of your children, someone you trust with them but not with your heart, that's enough." Robin's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through her armor. "What if I told you I'm starting to feel something? Not love. I'm not ready to call it that. But possibility. Different from that rainy night, built on reality instead of fantasy. Then I'd tell you to take all the time you need, no pressure, no expectations." That's a mature answer. "I've had practice at being immature. Thought I'd try something different." She almost smiled. "The boys want to talk tomorrow. Be prepared." The work continued. The showing up continued. The earning continued. And somewhere in those accumulated months of sick days and homework battles and broken appliances, somewhere in the ordinary, unglamorous moments of just being present, foundations were being laid for something that might eventually look like family. Chapter 10. Futures built on forgiveness. Some love stories don't get second chances. They get rebuilt chances, stronger than the first. The next evening, Prince and Harrison sat on the couch with Robin between them, a united front with something important to say. Justin sat across from them, heart hammering. "We've been talking," Prince began, "about you, about us, about what this is becoming." Harrison took over, direct as always. "You've been showing up for a long time now. You're consistent. You don't run when things get hard. You're proving yourself." "But showing up isn't the same as staying," Prince added. "We need to know what you want this to be, because we're ready to tell you what we want." Justin looked at all three of them. "What do you want?" "We want a father," Harrison said bluntly. "Not someone who visits, not a friend who helps sometimes, a father who's part of our lives completely." "We want you," Prince said softly. "If you really want us." The room spun slightly. "I want that more than anything, but you need to know I'm going to mess up. I don't have a model for this. I'm going to make mistakes." "Everyone messes up," Harrison said with the certainty of someone who'd thought this through logically. "What matters is whether you fix them or run from them." "You made huge mistakes before," Prince acknowledged, "but you showed us you can fix big things. Now we need to know you can fix the small ones too. When you forget something important or say the wrong thing, or mess up in normal ways." "You didn't give up when it was hard to earn our trust," Harrison added. "We need to know you won't give up when it's hard to keep it." Justin's eyes stung. "I won't give up. Not on you. Not ever. But I need you to promise me something too." "What?" they asked in unison. "Promise you'll tell me when I'm messing up, when I'm doing it wrong. Because I'm going to need you to teach me how to be your father as much as you might need me to teach you other things." Prince considered this. "So we're figuring it out together?" "Exactly together." "I can work with that," Harrison said, ever the analyst evaluating terms. Robine stood and pulled Justin into an embrace that felt like absolution and beginning. "They're giving you what I couldn't give easily. Don't waste it." "I won't. I swear on everything I am." The boys joined the embrace, 4 people becoming family through choice and work and courage. Later, after the boys were in bed, Robine and Justin sat on her balcony, watching Seattle sparkle beneath them. The rain had started again, of course it had, gentle and persistent. "What about us?" Justin asked quietly. "You and me?" Robine was quiet for a long time. "I don't know yet. The boys choosing you is one thing. Me choosing you is different, harder. I loved you that rainy night, fell completely in love with a stranger in a storm. You destroyed that. You can't rebuild that exact thing." "I don't want to rebuild it. That was built on fantasy and champagne. I want to build something real, something that survives because it's built on truth, not illusion." She looked at him, rain beginning to fall harder over the city. "I need time to trust that, to trust you with more than just their hearts. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me something, anything. Promise you'll tell me if this becomes too hard, if being their father, if earning my trust, if this life becomes a burden you're just enduring." "I promise. But Robine, this isn't a burden. Every moment with them is bigger than every empty achievement I collected before. This is the life I should have been living all along." She smiled then, truly smiled, and something loosened in Justin's chest. The months that followed settled into patterns. Justin attended parent-teacher conferences with Robine, learned the rhythms of homework and bedtimes and weekend activities. He made mistakes, forgot Harrison's science fair permission slip once, accidentally scheduled something during Prince's art class. But he apologized, fixed what he could, learned from each error. Robine watched this with careful attention, slowly allowing him deeper into not just the boys' lives, but her own. Coffee became regular. Dinners became frequent. Conversations became intimate. Not romantic yet, but real in ways that Rainy Night had never been. They talked about his parents, how his mother had reached out once asking for money and he'd said no for the first time in his life. About her company and the new initiative she was launching. About their fears for the boys, their hopes, the weight of raising children in a complicated world. One evening, almost a year after the boys had claimed him as their father, Robine asked Justin to stay after they'd gone to bed. "I've been thinking," she said, pouring wine they'd learned to share in modest amounts. About us. Justin's heart rate spiked, but he stayed quiet. You've proven yourself to the boys. You show up. You stay. You love them genuinely. I don't question that anymore. She paused. And I'm starting to not question you either, with me. What does that mean? It means I'm willing to try. Not marriage, not big commitments, just trying. Seeing if what we're building with them can extend to us. I'd like that. Very much. It needs to be slow. I need slow. Then we'll go slow. She moved closer, and for the first time since that rainy night, she kissed him. Gentle, tentative, testing whether the past could coexist with the present. When they pulled apart, she was crying. I'm scared. Me too. Good. Fear means we're taking this seriously. They dated like teenagers despite being adults with children, coffee dates and museum visits and long walks where they talked about everything and nothing. Sometimes it was hard. Sometimes old wounds reopened. But they talked through it, worked through it, chose each other again and again in small, deliberate ways. Dorothy eventually warmed to Justin incrementally, not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement that time and consistency had proven something. You're still on probation, she told him during one visit, but it's looking more like parole. Prince's art eventually was featured in regional galleries. Harrison's robotics earned him recognition at competitions. The boys grew, thrived, became more fully themselves with each passing season, and through it all, Justin showed up. Not perfectly, but consistently, learning to be a father in real time, learning to be a partner to Robin at the pace she needed, building a life that looked nothing like the one he'd lost, and everything like the one worth having. 2 years after the boys had first called him their father, Justin and Robin sat on that same balcony where so many important conversations had happened. The rain fell gently, washing the city in familiar patterns. Do you ever regret it? Justin asked. Making me suffer, taking everything. She considered carefully. No. You needed to be broken to rebuild. We all did, in different ways. That night in the rain was beautiful, but it was built on who we were pretending to be. This, she gestured at their life, their family, their hard-won reality. This is built on who we actually are. I love who we actually are. Me too, finally. She took his hand. I love you, Justin. Not the man from that rainy night. The man you actually are now, flawed and trying and showing up. I love you too. Have loved you since that first night, but differently now. Better. Real instead of fantasy. Through the windows, they could see their boys in the living room, Prince sketching while Harrison built something mechanical, both existing comfortably in their separate together space. Their children, their family, built from wreckage and rain and the stubborn refusal to let mistakes define futures. Some futures begin with mistakes. The best ones begin with making them right. This was their future, built not on fantasy but on thousands of ordinary days, built on showing up, staying present, choosing each other until choosing became breathing. Justin held Robin's hand and understood that this was what he'd been too scared to imagine that morning when he'd called her just a fun night. She'd been right to make him suffer, right to make him earn every inch of ground, right to refuse easy forgiveness and demand he prove himself worthy. Because now, holding what actually mattered, he understood that some reckonings come in storms, but rebuilding happens in rain, gentle, persistent, washing away everything false until only truth remains. And their truth was beautiful, imperfect, hard-won, built from broken pieces. But theirs, finally, completely, undeniably theirs. The end.